And okay, we're recording. Hello, and welcome everybody to A Window into Rare, our 2022 Rare Disease Day panel discussion. Hey, Jen, if you'd like to remove the slide, that would be great. Thank you. So I am Liza Bernstein, and my pronouns are she, they. I'm the Senior Director of Patient and Community Engagement here at Bionews, which is the publisher of a whole array of rare disease publications featuring content written by scientists and also by people with lived experience of disease, a few of whom you're going to meet very soon. Before I go any further, three very important things. First of all, I am beyond thrilled to introduce you to Brandy Moody, our ASL interpreter. Brandy, please introduce yourself. You got to unmute.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brandy. My name sign is this. I am an ASL interpreter and also a Cushing's disease survivor.
And columnist at Cushing's disease.
Columnist, yes, that's right.
At Cushing's Disease News.
Forgot about that. Yes, Cushing's Disease News, yes.
Thanks, Brandy. A couple housekeeping things. We've enabled closed captioning. So if you can't see the transcript automatically, just look at your lower menu bar and find the button all the way on the right-hand side that says See Live Transcript CC and just click on that. And finally, to keep things simple, we've disabled the chat function. So use the Q&A tool if you have any questions for us, and start thinking about your questions because we will have a Q&A portion after the main discussion. All right. I just want to start by taking a moment to acknowledge that, first of all, it is Rare Disease Day, and that today, as we all know only too well, there is a lot of, shall I say, difficult stuff going on out there in the world. And I just want to thank you all for taking the time to be with us together in community on this special day. I don't know about you, but I found that being connected and in community helps, helps us get through hard times. A little bit about me. Along with my work in patient and community engagement and design, I'm an artist and a patient advocate. I found my way into advocacy after having 3 separate cases of breast cancer. Now, that's a very common disease, but having it 3 times before the age of 45 is extremely rare. It doesn't make me a rare disease patient, but that, plus all of the fallout and the chronic and disabling conditions that I continued to live with, does inform my perspective. I'm also what is known as a third culture kid. I grew up in 3 countries and cultures, and I'm all about curiosity and connection and facilitating bridges of understanding between all sorts of people. It's imperative to me to fight for meaningful representation and accessibility, particularly in the age of precision medicine. They go hand in hand and are still as rare diseases. As the fictional character Harry Bosch says, everybody counts or nobody counts. So for this panel, which was designed with those 2 concepts in mind, I wanted to dig deep and pass the mic to a group of people who are passionate about making meaning from their experience and connecting with and helping others. They are true experts in their rare diseases, as well as on topics including disability justice, ableism, mental health, and other things that all of us with serious diagnoses and chronic conditions share. Now, one more thing about accessibility. To ensure that our panelist, Sherry Toh, who lives in Singapore, can be a full participant, despite the huge time zone difference. I think they're 17 hours ahead, so Sherry's sleeping. And also other factors related to her rare disease. Sherry's contributions will be read by her fellow columnist, Bree Albers. So without further ado, I'm honored to open up this window into rare and to introduce you to our panelists. We're going to start with Claire Richmond, because Rare Disease Day has extra significance for her. We need to see Claire, not the slide. Claire, it's you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Liza. What a beautiful introduction. I am Claire Richmond. I live with acute intermittent porphyria. That's Porphyria. And I live in Des Moines, Iowa. My pronouns are she, they, and I am a columnist for Porphyria News. I also co-founded a patient organization called This Porphyria Life, and I am a Rare 360 expert through the Rare Advocacy Movement's Adults Living Rare initiative. I lived with acute porphyria for 19 years before receiving a diagnosis. Insomnia, brain fog, and pain prior to my menstrual cycle started early when I was a teenager. And like so many young women, I was brushed off by providers the minute they heard that my abdominal pain was occurring around the time of my period. I saw more than 30 specialists in 5 states over nearly 2 decades. And all I had to show at the end of it was a collection of misdiagnoses. Most of them were for mental health conditions. After spending nearly 7 months hospitalized in 2016 for intestinal paralysis and completely debilitating pain, I finally met a provider who thought to test for this obscure disease. He was a resident and had recently learned about porphyria while studying for one of his exams. To his utter shock and mine, the test came back positive. That was 3 days prior to Rare Disease Day in 2017. So Rare Disease Day has always been pretty special to me. While I was recovering from that attack in 2017, I sat on my couch with my laptop open and I just watched the internet come to life with zebras and stories, and all of them were heartbreaking but hopeful. So I'm just really honored to be here today. It's taken me a lot of time and therapy to be able to tell my story, but I have found that it's so helpful for me to build connections and feel less alone. Now I'm going to pass the mic to Paris.
Hello, thanks, Claire. My name is Paris. I am a Cushing's disease survivor. I live in Houston, Texas, by way of Pensacola, Florida. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am a columnist for Cushing Disease News. I was diagnosed in my early 30s with low testosterone after having symptoms of weight gain, low libido, low energy, mood swings, and a loss of muscle mass. My PCP started to treat me with steroids. Unfortunately, there were no changes noticed, so the doses were increased until one day I ended up in the hospital with fluid around my heart, which was making it difficult for me to breathe. A month later, thanks to an MRI, a tumor was discovered on my pituitary gland. I had transfernoidal surgery and later a gamma knife procedure. Although the root issue had been addressed, the combination of steroids and tumor caused me to develop Cushing's disease. SEASE. I share my story by writing, counseling, and providing life coaching to others because I understand what it's like to struggle with your mental health, struggle with body image, dealing with the change that life throws at you, and not only getting through it, but also thriving after you have weathered the storm. I have been very blessed to be able to get through the difficult times, but it doesn't absolve my responsibility to help others and show them there is hope. One of the worst feelings to experience is feeling like you are alone during a trial in your life. I want people to know you may have to be your own advocate, so don't quit. But most importantly, I want people to know you can still live and thrive. And next, I would like to pass it on to Michelle.
All right, thank you, Paris, I appreciate it. So, hi, my name is Michelle Gonzaba, and I live in Texas, and my pronouns are she, her, and I am a columnist or myasthenia gravis, MYASTHENIA GRAVIS. I was a teacher for 3 years, but now I currently work in market research. I was diagnosed with myasthenia gravis at the age of 20 after experiencing muscle weakness symptoms for almost a year. I first noticed weakness in my mouth when I was brushing my teeth and water started to dribble out of my mouth because I couldn't keep it closed. From that point, the weakness spread to different parts of my body. After around 5 years of different treatments, hospital stays, and a partial sternotomy and a thymectomy, I've been in remission for about 6 years. So no more treatments or no more medications, but I will always have myasthenia gravis. I share my story because I need to make my diagnosis mean something. I don't want it to be something sad or traumatic. I want to be able to help others who feel just like I did when I was first diagnosed. I want to be the person that I needed when I didn't know what to do or how to move forward when I got my diagnosis. Thank you to everyone for being here and spending your time with us. And I will go ahead, pass the mic to Sherry and Bree.
Hi everyone, my name is Bree Albers. My pronouns are she, her. I am a columnist for Spinal Muscular Atrophy at Bionews today. Today I will be reading on behalf of one of my very best friends, Sherry, who has written her introduction, so I'll be reading for her. Hi, my name is Sherry Toh, and I live in Singapore. I'll be watching and available to chat via social media when I wake up in about 6 hours. I identify as female and am interested in gender expression and how disabilities can affect the way we look at gender. My pronouns are she, they. I was diagnosed with SMA as a baby. It took my parents multiple trips to doctors before they learned I had spinal muscular atrophy, SPINAL MUSCULAR ATROPHY, or SMA. The host has been to experiencing the trauma of misdiagnosis was trying to figure out the cause of neuropathic pain in myself and later the rest of my body. Eventually, a neurologist confirmed the cause and was like, yeah, the type of scoliosis, the severe curve of your spine bending forwards and sideways, is pinching your nerves. Not having answers made me anxious and was worsening the pain by keeping me awake. But otherwise, I got lucky by knowing I had a rare disease as soon as I could form memories and process my surroundings as a toddler. I write and advocate to show others that life is complex, messy, and sometimes beyond our understanding, and that we need that kind of complex representation to create inclusive communities and push for progressive change.
Thank you, Bree. Thank you. And thank you all of you for your introductions. So now we're going to move to the panel discussion portion of this event. And the first question that I asked all the moderators is, what are 2 or 3 overlooked things that you wish rare disease awareness and advocacy would focus on? So Michelle, let's start with you.
So for me, one of the things I don't hear about a lot in the rare disease community is how patients of color are treated differently by doctors and other healthcare workers. It doesn't happen to everyone, in every situation, but it was something that I experienced very early on in my diagnosis. I went to the doctor. I had a piece of paper with me with every single weakness I had. I had weakness in my eye. I could barely swallow. I couldn't keep my mouth closed. My arms and my legs were weak. I could barely walk more than 5 minutes. And I sat down and I was ready to explain. He listened to me. They said they needed to dig deeper on what was going on, but he told me, don't do any witchcraft or anything like that to solve what's going on. And I was like, why is he talking about witchcraft? And I was very confused. And I remember going home and I talked to my mother and I burst into tears because I just thought they don't take me seriously. They're thinking I'm going to do some weird stuff to try to handle. So I think putting more of a spotlight on that, and I don't know how to solve that problem. I just don't have the brain for it or the expertise, but I think, again, just putting the spotlight. Another thing I think that we need to talk more about is patient advocacy, as far as some people don't have the physical ability to speak up for themselves sometimes. Definitely for me, at my weakest, I couldn't speak for more than 1 or 2 minutes before my voice just completely went out because the muscles were too weak to keep going. And luckily, I had family members who could speak for me. A lot of patients don't have that, right? Especially for us when the physical part we literally can't do it physically. So I think talking about organizations, I know there's organizations out there that do help, but I don't think they get enough exposure. And then just one last thing for me, I think beyond the diagnosis and the symptoms, what does a long-term life look like with the rare disease? I think, you see lists of treatments and pills, surgeries, but it's like, what does this look like in 20 years, 30 years? How do I handle it? So I think those things for me, it was hard for me to find those pieces of information when I was first diagnosed.
Michelle, thank you so much. There's so much that I think so many of us can relate to in what you said. I just want to go back to the first point about this witchcraft comment and invite people to look up the concept of cultural humility. People talk a lot about diversity and inclusion and all of that, but there's cultural competence, but we have to go beyond cultural competence to cultural humility. So just in case people are interested, that's something to look up. And then what you said about your last point, and I don't want to dwell on myself, but this is something that we've seen, for instance, in the world of breast cancer, where I know that we can all learn from each other. When people are diagnosed young, it's like, just like you, what does the rest of your life look like? And I see Claire nodding her head, how do these diagnoses and these medications and treatments, how do they affect the rest of our lives? I know that we're going to come back to that topic in a moment, and we're going to move to Claire. What were some of the overlooked things that you wish rare disease advocacy would focus on?
Sure. I brought a couple to the discussion today. Mental health, access, and the industry patient hierarchy were the three things on my mind. Both mental health and access have a lot to do with the disease state that you have, the resources, the organizations, the general knowledge of the disease, but then also the intersectionality that you bring to your appointments and to your life, your background. Patients are not seen as experts of their disease, and that is really problematic in a lot of situations. Many who go through any diagnosis journey can be traumatized by their experiences along the way. And then we get a piece of paper and we're kind of like sent out into the world in a lot of cases, trying to figure out what's next, trying to find people that we can connect with. And sometimes it's easy to find the advocacy organizations, but sometimes the people at the advocacy organizations don't have the same perspective because they're not patients. So it can be really lonely and isolating. That affects our mental health. It affects our well-being. Not enough people talk about medical PTSD, and that's such a real thing. It results from gaslighting and being brushed off because in some cases your symptoms aren't believable, or they might be invisible, like a lot of Porphyria's symptoms are. Trauma continues to be triggered when access is an issue. For instance, I currently can't find a neurologist in the entire state of Iowa who's willing to see me. They will either outright deny me when the referral is made, or when they learn a little bit more about what I'm looking for, then they'll deny me a week or a month later. One time it happened 2 hours before my scheduled appointment. And so for me, it's not even, access isn't necessarily about coverage. I have coverage, I just can't find a doctor. Access has also been scary lately when you think about the availability of services. Porphyria, for instance, I've had 2 severe attacks in the last year, and the hospital was full. So I was sent home to manage on my own, and I wasn't able to walk or eat or drink. And really someone needed to be monitoring me, but I couldn't have a caregiver or a care partner in the room with me during COVID. So my medical trauma kicked in and I froze and I couldn't advocate for myself. And it's scary. And that certainly affected my mental health. And I know I'm not alone in having those situations either. In terms of disease expertise, I mentioned earlier that I think we're all disease experts, but we're not necessarily recognized as them. I'm getting at this industry patient hierarchy. Providers are incredible. They're amazing researchers, scientists. We need them. We love them. But when patients aren't trusted to provide their expertise, it's hard for research innovation to occur. Sometimes the wrong questions are asked in research. Sometimes research studies can fail because patients weren't involved from the get-go. And I just continue to see patients being devalued by an industry that refuses to recognize that my 25 years of lived rare disease experience can go beyond what's published in medical literature.
Claire, thank you so much. There again, you know, we all have so much in common, and then we can learn from each other. Again, I just go back to the cancer community, which in many ways with advocacy, just by sheer volume of numbers, because cancer is not a rare disease, although there are rare cancers, we have had to fight so hard and are only now, you know, in the last few years, getting through to be able to be seen as peers in some cases and so on and so forth. And, you know, as I've already offered to you, Claire, and I offered to everyone here, you know, we all need to learn from each other, and anything that I can help to help you guys and people with rare diseases to break through those ceilings, it can be done, but we just need to keep fighting. One other point about what you just said regarding medical trauma, to people who have had like a broken leg or some kind of, you know, everyday encounter with the medical system, maybe they had a bad encounter and maybe that was traumatic. When you have a chronic condition, a catastrophic condition, or a condition where you have to keep going back, you keep going back. So if you have previous trauma, then new interactions cause more trauma, and it's cumulative. So these are really serious things that we need to be addressed. All right, I need to stop talking and move on to Claire. I mean, we move from Claire to Sherry and Bree. So Jen, yep, right there, sharing the screen with Sherry's answer that Bree will read.
So Sherry wrote, as a non-American, I wish for more international collaboration. We can learn so much from each other. It can help to raise awareness and put more pressure on government bodies to review and approve disease-modifying treatments and to provide funding for patients. These are big hurdles Singapore has to overcome for SMA patients to receive Evrysdi, Spinraza, and Zolgensma hopefully soon. Another area is adults with SMA. For example, in the United States, the SMA community has recently been shifting towards considering adult perspectives in deeper ways in terms of mental health, sexuality, etc. I haven't seen that focus on adults here in Singapore. Also, the question of where adults with SMA are going to live once our parents or guardians can't look after us anymore. Institutionalization is not an option for most because of potential abuse and the fact that it rips us away from our communities and the lives we want. Yet many of us struggle to find jobs, and social services discourage us from earning enough to support ourselves by threatening to take away the financial aid we need for medical equipment and fees. Then there's the issue of the types of caregiver options available. They are often paid little, untrained for people with disabilities, trained only for the elderly, or are simply not what patients need. Abuse happens there too. The systems we have in place do not expect people with rare diseases to live into adulthood, and they are not built to provide adequate support. My mom is 47 years old. She's a cancer survivor. My brothers will want to have their own lives. I need to learn to survive as an adult on my own. But if there's no way for me to do that, then I never will.
Hey, Bree, thank you so much. What happened? I'm so sorry, everybody. We had a little glitch. Bree, it sounds like you were reading the answers for Sherry's final question. So we will, that was question, actually for question 2. But I'm sorry, you guys. Yeah, you were reading for question 2 and we needed them for question 1. So we'll just have you flip that in when we do this now. All right, so now we're going to our actual question number 2. And that is to ask, where have you seen examples of impact when things you mentioned, in your previous answer have been focused on, or even in, other diagnoses or other areas of life? Where have you seen impact? And we'll start with Michelle.
I think what I've seen so far, to be honest, I haven't seen a ton yet. I think just us as columnists, we also have forums for Bionews for patients. That's one way where we can show people, hey, this is how we live with our rare disease. This is how our day-to-day lives are. So I think that's one way. We've kind of improved on what I talked about in the previous question. Another thing that I have seen is that there was recently a documentary created about people with myasthenia gravis. It's called A Mystery to Me. I haven't seen the whole thing yet, but I've seen the trailer in parts. But for me, that was just seeing other people living their lives, just the normal day-to-day stuff, not everything dramatic and horrible, but how do they deal with it day to day? For me was a big thing. Like, they're just like me. I can see myself in that. So I think more things in the media, that kind of stuff, would really help with just getting people to understand not just what the disease is, but then how do people live with it. So those are kind of the biggest things I've seen that would help with the things I discussed earlier.
Thanks, Michelle. Okay, let's go to Paris. Where have you seen some impact that you'd like to share with us?
I saw it with my mother-in-law, Felicia Geralds. She's a great example being able to fight through colon cancer. And at one point she had beat it based on the information that she was able to obtain, the knowledge that she started to implement daily in her life, and her entire lifestyle changed. Her mental health, got great in the areas that she was focusing on. And I believe that's a good example moving forward, especially when we're talking about advocating for yourself, just based on all the different experiences that we just heard from Michelle, from Claire, from Bree and Sherry. All those things in one, you need to be able to address some of those situations. You got to be your own advocate, but you also got to be able to persevere, be resilient through a lot of those areas of your life based on some of the things that you do experience. And as Claire said, the medical PTSD that we don't talk about too often, it does impact you very much. And it's important to address that mental health issue because you can be left out there without the information of what happens after the diagnosis. What does your life look like afterwards, as Michelle was saying? So I think that's a good example of being able to address an area that's overlooked.
And Paris, if I may ask, you do happen to have some very special, particular expertise in the area of mental health from a provider standpoint. Is that correct?
Yes, I am a counselor. So I do work with a lot of clients from a different perspective now than when I initially got into working into the field, because I do understand the impact of it and the different areas where it can impact your life, not just physically, but mentally, those around you, and the importance of being able to get stabilized and then addressing these other issues that come along with it.
And this is where, back to Claire's point about, the hierarchy between industry, broad term industry and, patients with lived experience, people often forget that patients with lived experience aren't just patients. They have, we have professions, we have education, we have career, we have, et cetera. So here is Paris, who is also a provider as well as a patient. So it's really important to see the whole picture, with people. Thank you, Paris. Okay, next up actually is Claire, back to, examples of impact. Let us know what you'd like to contribute.
Sure, so I talked about mental health and I'll keep talking about it, I guess. It was really difficult for me to find a provider. Michelle, you touched on this too. And Lisa, you gave the example of a broken leg. I think that providers, in my experience, are really great at helping people get over humps in our lives. But sometimes when you have something chronic, your life becomes the hump. So, who can I find in my corner to help me live on top of the hump? Because I might never get over. I might, but I can't think that way. It's not healthy for me. So I had to not be afraid to break up with my therapist. And I had to do that when I got my diagnosis initially. And it took 3 more tries to find somebody that I really liked, but it was worth it for me. I have somebody who does not have a chronic illness on her own, but she is a fantastic listener, and we just get along really great together. I also have access to mental health, and I know that that's an issue for a lot of people. I mentioned the industry patient hierarchy in our health system. One organization that I am involved with is called the Rare Advocacy Movement. And they are themselves a group of patients that have come together and said, we have a voice, and they work on empowering others and each other. And they've created things like speaker panels, and they consult on white papers, and they're just doing some really, really incredible things worldwide. Most recently today, they just published a white paper on focusing on the pediatric to adult transition and rare disease. And so you can check that out on their website, rareadvocacymovement.org. Yeah, so I guess they're just recognizing the value of real life experience to industry and helping industry recognize it as well.
Thank you, Claire. Yeah, we're going to talk again about the transition from pediatric to adult in just a bit. Okay, so next up is Bree reading for Sherry on question number 2, and this is the correct slide. And over to you, Bree.
Hopefully this is the right answer this time. Sherry says, one approach, I think we lack. The question is always, what can we do for the disabled instead of what are the society-wide benefits if we can integrate the disabled into society fully. In 2019, I took an online women's health course by Anne Firth Murray, who's this amazing women's rights activist and teacher at Stanford. The course looked at poverty, education, war, etc. as issues that affect women's health beyond reproductive health. One really helpful lesson I took away from it was how researchers will look at the net benefit of pulling young girls out of poverty and into schools. Entire families in areas would go on to earn and grow more. Looking at the net benefit people with disabilities can bring is not something I've seen much in disability advocacy, except in the gaming world, where the accessibility scene is now focusing more on implementing accessibility over why accessibility is needed. The gaming industry knows it's socially and financially profitable to be inclusive. Everyone else has to catch up. As for me, writing for SMA News Today has had such an impact to have my work be valued and to allow me to settle more into adulthood by having some savings and new opportunities opening up as a result of my column doubling as a portfolio. I've changed a lot in the past year and gone to do some cool work in gaming journalism that I couldn't even dream of. It goes to show how far trusting someone who's disabled to be independent can go.
Thank you, Bree and Sherry. I know Sherry will see this later. Okay, so we're going to move on to question number 3. The question is, what, if anything, have you had to give up on or let go of as a result of your diagnosis and lived experience? And how have you navigated that transition? For example, have you had to let go of any dreams and maybe have new ones? So we'll start with you, Paris.
Thank you. My entire life changed. My day-to-day operations, my career changed for a moment. Navigating the transition was difficult. However, I did gain much more than I thought I had lost. This experience had made me a better man. It forced me to tap into other gifts, other talents that I didn't realize I had. And I also didn't put any dreams aside as much as the direction just changed in me being able to achieve them. So we're still on track, and those dreams are starting to flourish now, and starting to see a lot of things come into harvest.
Thank you, Paris. All right, Bree, we're back to you and Sherry. This is answering question number 3. It's going to be the next slide. Perfect. Okay, Bree, your turn.
Sherry writes, having SMA since I was a baby has meant giving up dream after dream. My first was to be an actress in Hollywood, but it's not like we've had much media representation for the disabled until very recently. The second was to be a singer, but SMA affects your lung function, so non-professional singing for me. The third dream is to be an artist. I got to live that one for a bit until my arms became as good as lit needles. It was devastating each time I realized a dream wouldn't work out. I feel lucky that I got into writing as a hobby, which has led to my poems and publications outside of SMA News today. My current dream is to see where this takes me, maybe to more dating journalism and getting some fiction published one day. But strangely and miraculously, SMA has allowed me to live one dream instead of barring me from it. I loved Disney's 1991 Beauty and the Beast as a kid. I've always held on to the dream of finding a friendship and relationship like Belle's and the Beast. And SMA led me to someone who, like Belle was there for the Beast, was there for me in my darkest hours in the past year. I won't say more here, besides that I love that someone very much, as a friend and as someone more special than a friend. If you want to know more about our relationship, I've written about it in my column.
Thank you, Bree, and thank you, Sherry. Okay, so now our next person to talk about having to perhaps let go of things due to the diagnosis is Claire.
Yes, like Paris, I would say my whole life changed, and it really had to. I fought it for a long time, and that resistance just created turmoil. My body, in fact, got more and more sick because of the stress that I was putting on it and because of the things I was forcing it to do. I lost what I thought was my dream job while I was in the hospital. And then 2 days later, I got my diagnosis. So that was a whirlwind way to start 2017. I tried to work for a little bit after that, and it just had to accept that my body couldn't physically sustain that traditional 40-hour work week. So I feel like I really lost my whole career. And much of my goals at that time of my life were professional, career-driven goals. While a lot of my friends were meeting their special someone and settling down, I was going to grad school and getting 2 master's degrees, and I had things that I wanted to do and impacts I wanted to make. And I look back on that, and I think I was really running from reality. I was trying to distract myself from how bad my body was beginning to feel, worse and worse and worse. And, you know, I'm not going to go back to a doctor who tells me nothing's wrong again. So I'm just going to fight through it. And I'm able to use so much of what I learned in school and so much of what I learned in the working world for several years. It comes through in my writing, and I think my perspective on the healthcare industry is much stronger because of my public health background. And I would say the biggest change, the biggest thing I've had to let go is just being a busybody. I used to think productivity was everything. I used to think that I wasn't worth anything unless I was creating or accomplishing, or even just being a busybody for me was some sort of equivalent of my worth. So the biggest change that I've made is embracing the stillness. I used to be out every night with friends or with volunteering or leadership, and then I'd be up early pounding the pavement, and I can't sustain that right now. There was a limbo where I knew that things had to change, but I couldn't figure out how to do it, where I was really, really depressed, and I feel like I needed to grieve. I needed to grieve it all, and I just felt so stuck. Then the hospital system that I went to was offering a mindfulness-based meditation 8-week course, and that literally transformed my brain. Not only do I accept my body for the way that it's showing up on any particular day, but I can find peace with it. Living with porphyria can feel unpredictable, and your body feels a little volatile sometimes. It's easy to think that you don't trust your own body. And that was really difficult for me for a long time. So I meditate for hours every week. It's really, really important to me to try to live in the present and not to judge my worth based on my accomplishments any longer, because my accomplishments don't have anything to do with the person that I am. I honor my body in new ways, and in the process, I have found acceptance of my disease, and I have found other people who have gone through similar processes to accept their disease. And I think those are friendships I will have for a lifetime.
Thank you, Claire. You guys are all just so amazing. All right, I'll be quiet because I want to hear from Michelle. It's your turn now. What, if anything, have you had to let go of, and how have you navigated that transition?
So for me, because I started experiencing symptoms when it was, I think, a week before I started my second year of college. And it was that entire year where things got worse and worse. And then by the summer, I was diagnosed. At that age, I was 19. I had very generic dreams. I thought I was going to have some office and walk around with like a brief, whatever that means. I didn't really know exactly what I was going to do, but I had a very general outlook, right? And it was an outlook that did not include a rare disease. But as far as college goes, I really had to give up what a typical college experience is. Like I said, that whole second year, I would give presentations and my voice would start going out, and I could see people's faces looking at me, other students, and they're like, something's wrong. If to explain what I sounded like, it was very nasally, because at that time I thought I had really bad allergies. That's what I thought. It was a very nasal voice that got worse and worse. But after my sophomore year, I had to move back home because I was sick. I was going I lived in somewhere else to go to college out of town. So I had to come back home because I needed to be taken care of. I needed my family. I had to get treatment. I had to go to a certain doctor. I had to take a year off college. So then I was already a year behind everyone who I graduated high school with. So I would look on social media and, they're doing this and they're doing that. And I'm like, I can't even get out of bed and go to the bathroom without help. And eventually, I was on a ton of different medications. I had surgery, and I was eventually able to enroll in a local university, and I graduated. And when I think about it now, I really liked the school I ended up at. I made some really good friends. I have a job that I really like. So I don't know what dreams I missed. I don't know what my life would have been like if that hadn't have happened. I don't know specifically, but I can say that I'm very happy with the life that I have now. So that's kind of where I am with that.
Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, all the different experiences we have, it affects us differently, and then it's what we make of them, right? And it can change from one day to the next as well. Okay, so now we're going to move to our next question, which is, what would you tell someone newly diagnosed with your condition? And this is question number 4. And the first person we're going to have answer that is Sherry. Well, it's going to be the Sherry Bree combo with question number 4. Next, perfect. We're on the right slide. Go ahead.
All right. Sherry writes, I'd say it's going to be hard. You're going to feel like a lot of things are your fault or SMA's fault, and they're not. It's not your fault. Our healthcare and other public systems aren't equipped for you. It's not your fault the people in charge have decided your life should come with a price tag of hundreds of thousands of dollars you can't afford. We should all have a right to thrive in life. It's why we have entire communities who have fought for you and who will continue to fight for you. We'll be okay. You're going to be okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Bree and Sherry. Let's go now to Claire. What would you tell someone newly diagnosed with porphyria?
Every single thing that Sherry said was so spot on. Holy smokes, I don't want to follow her. No. Yeah, I had that guilt for sure. Oh my goodness. I would echo, it is not your fault. It is so circumstantial. I would tell somebody newly diagnosed with acute hepatic porphyria that there are porphyria experts, specialists that are considered experts in porphyria. They're really very helpful to see if you can see them, but they're difficult to get into depending on where you live and what your health coverage might look like. Des Moines is kind of a donut hole. It's the Midwest. So I feel like there's a lot of providers kind of around everywhere but here. So I ended up having to drive 20 hours to see an expert. But it was a milestone for me when I first got diagnosed. I would also say you don't have to see them all the time, you know, especially if you can find local care who's willing to coordinate. You're going to need a doctor that you can really trust, a doctor who's willing to kind of be your sidekick and learn along the way. And that's not what a lot of experiences are in the medical community. Even with severe disease, patients look to doctors for what's next. But when you have a rare disease, that's a conversation that you have to be able to have together, because it's very possible that that provider has never seen another one of you and never will see another one of you. But I think, you know, I have a local doctor that I think is incredible, and we work together, and he's never seen a porphyria patient. So it can happen. And I don't think you can settle for anything less. It's too important, especially when you first get diagnosed. Sometimes you can be really unstable depending on how long you've been untreated and how badly your attacks have been. Acute porphyria is so complex. You can kind of pick your specialty. And some people say they like to have a quarterback doctor. I'm not a sports person, but I'll use that for lack of a better term. Someone that kind of coordinates your care with everybody else. It can be a hematologist. It could be a super involved primary care physician who you trust. It could be a neurologist or a gastroenterologist or a cardiologist. Just have somebody that you're seeing regularly, and don't be afraid to ask questions, and don't be afraid to move on if it's not working out. Find a provider who welcomes your expertise, because you are an expert.
Thank you, Claire. So spot on for any serious condition. Okay, we'll go next to Paris. What would you tell someone newly diagnosed?
First thing I'll tell them is to fight. Although your life may change and it's going to look different, this doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to live a good life. You just have to adjust. Make sure that you have a strong support system. I'm a huge advocate in making sure that you have the right support, the right people around you. And if you don't have those yet, you can build one. Whether it be your spouse, significant other, caregiver, friends, family. Make sure that they are all educated on what's going with you. Make sure that there's enough information going around, the right information, of course, with all of y'all, because information is a good weapon, and it's going to be a key to you being able to move forward. Refuse to lose, you know, push forward and allow your trial to become your triumph. Don't sit back, you know, don't sit back. Don't, you know, take that moment to, you know, let the emotions just come out and come through, but brush it off, get up, and then you start moving and you fight. Don't make any permanent decisions based on a temporary situation. I use that a lot, and I mean that because sometimes we move into the wrong direction with our thought process when we are given something so traumatic to deal with. It's just a chapter of your life, and it doesn't define you. It just gets better.
Thank you, Paris. One of the things you said makes me want to ask you a follow-up question, particularly given your dual expertise as a patient and as a counselor, which is if someone doesn't have what they feel is a good support system, and I heard you on all of the kinds of people that we can turn to, do you have an idea of like what someone could say to a friend who maybe it's a good friend, but we're afraid to tell them what's happening, or how to reach out? Do you have any tips on that?
Yes, I do. One thing I would say is be honest. Tell them, because a lot of times, people are just going off of what you're acting like sometimes, and they're not too sure. They don't know how to deal with it, but you talk with them, you sit down with everyone, sit down with that friend, talk with them about what's going on, talk to them about how you're feeling. And then these are the things that you need from them. One, set those expectations for yourself, but also for them so that they understand as well. And then if you're comfortable, have them to come to some of those appointments that you may have. One thing, you may not remember everything that you need to ask sometimes. It can be difficult going in there, and the anxiety may kick in, so you're not even in the right place thinking, but you may have someone else there that can be calm with you. They can hear the information, they can ask the questions that y'all discussed. And then it also helps you just move forward and being able to develop a solid plan. But that would be the first place I would say to start. Be honest. They're not mind readers. They really aren't. So talk with them, keep those lines of communication open. And that's a good place to start.
Thank you, Paris. Yeah, that can sometimes be the hardest thing for people, myself included, to ask for help or to be vulnerable and let people know where we are. But if we don't do that, then we can't build that support system. And people who care about us want to help us. They love us, right? Or they appreciate us as friends. But it can be super hard to do that. All right. Now we're going to go to Michelle. I don't want to forget you, Michelle. Michelle, what would you tell someone newly diagnosed with myasthenia gravis?
I would say, and this sort of echoes what Claire said earlier about doctors and specialists and finding the right one. It's do your research on the doctors around you in your area or people that you can reach. Because for me, the first neurologist that I was sent to, and it was just because my primary care knew them, I was sent there, everything went off the rails. I ended up in the ICU with a breathing tube and a feeding tube. And it was, like I said, it just went crazy. And I don't know if it's just my personality. I can't really fully blame the neurologist because they didn't know anything about my disease. They didn't know anything about myasthenia. They were trying to figure out, just like I was trying to figure it out. But I finally, and I don't know, again, just might be how I am, I felt so bad leaving the neurologist, but I did because I was like, this is my life. This is my future. And I did research. I reached out to MG expertise people nationally, and I ended up finding a neurologist in my city who is an expert on neuromuscular diseases. And I can say clearly, she completely saved my life. She saved my life with the treatments and the plans. So I would say, and kind of like Paris said too, like just it's a fact that you have this disease, and then you need to figure out a plan to go forward. Obviously, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just want to clarify a point there. When you said you reached out nationally, what does that mean? Like, did you go online? What did you do?
So I went online, and I also had family members, my mom and my sister, who went online too and did research. We found websites about myasthenia gravis. There were a couple of groups at that time. Again, this was about 9 years ago. And there were big doctors who would do research and that kind of stuff. So we went through that, who then they gave us information, and then they gave us information, and then it just narrowed down to my city and to the neurologist I still visit today. So yeah, I would say just make a plan, start figuring it out, how to treat yourself physically, because once you have that plan, then you can start to deal with the mental effects with your mental health and things like that. So that's my advice.
Thank you, Michelle. Now we're going to move to our final question. And then after the final question, we will have the Q&A. So we'll go for another around 20 to 30 minutes. Hopefully you can all stick with us. All right, the final question to all of you is, what would you tell somebody who is living with your diagnosis? So not someone newly diagnosed, but someone living with it. And we'll start with you, Claire.
Don't compare yourself to others. Ever, don't do it. It sucks the fun out of life. Even other people that have your disease can manifest in so many different ways. I know people who have my disease at work, and I used to be so mean to myself that I couldn't cut it. And you know what was not a useful frame of mind for me. In fact, it probably set me back, because stress can cause porphyria attacks. So I would tell somebody living with the diagnosis, yes, our bodies are unpredictable day to day. You're not making that up, that's real. And it can be kind of maddening. So I would tell them to do themselves a favor and stop fighting it. Stop saying things like, when I get back to normal. Stop saying things like, I used to do this, because you might find yourself living in there, living in that space of what if, or in the past. And it's just not a healthy place to live. And it's a good way to get stuck and not be able to move past, to find a place where your life can still have meaning, even though it looks different. And your disease does not have to define you, and it shouldn't define you. I would say find at least one other person with your diagnosis who's like-minded. I mentioned this already. I would say don't focus on the pain. And I would say something that I wish that a physician would have told me when I first got diagnosed, and that's that for some people, these symptoms and these recurrent attacks are permanent. They're just how your life is going to be now. Because I think the sooner that you can accept that disease permanency, the sooner that you can continue to move on with your life, accept it, find peace, find joy.
Thank you, Claire. Again, all of you are talking about your specific experience with your specific diagnosis, but so much of it crosses over for all of us. Okay. Now we're going to go to Sherry and Bree with the answer to the last question, question number 5.
Sherry says, if you want to reach out and do anything together, I'm open. We have to be here for each other, right? And I know she would like all of you to reach out to her on Twitter. Her Twitter is listed up there. She would love to hear from you.
Thank you, Bree and Sherry. Okay, let's go next to Michelle. What would you tell someone living with, I'm going to try and say it again, we got to learn how to pronounce these things, myasthenia gravis.
Perfect, that's perfect. It's very similar to Claire. Cut yourself some slack. You know, there's not like certain goalposts that you have to hit, like, oh, a year after diagnosis, I need to be able to do this again, or 2 years this. Just like most rare diseases, or just really all diseases, myasthenia gravis is different for everyone. Like for me, you know, I'm very lucky, knock on wood, I'm in remission right now. But that doesn't mean a month from now, some weakness can start coming back. I have had a time in remission where I got really stressed out at work when I was teaching, and all of a sudden my mouth started feeling weird and my eyes started feeling weird, and I thought, oh no, it's happening again. But I calmed down. I went to my neurologist. She put me back on some certain meds and everything was okay. And I eventually weaned off those meds again. So I think it's just, yeah, just cut yourself some slack. This isn't your fault. Like so many of us have said today, just be kind to yourself. And I would also say, don't let it become your full identity. You're not just someone with rare disease. And that was something that's taken me years to kind of move on from. It's something that is just a part of me. There are many parts to me. That's one part. Sometimes it takes over more of my life than I would like. I wouldn't want it to. But yeah, it's not your whole identity. It's not you. It's just one part of you.
Thank you, Michelle. And finally, Paris, we're going to go over to you. What would you tell someone living with Cushing's? Or is it living with Cushing's or surviving Cushing's? Or does it depend on where you are in the spectrum of it?
I think everything that you said. For me, I'm no longer living with Cushing's. One thing I would say though is don't focus on who you were. It's a diagnosis. If this disease, if it hasn't changed you, then it will change you at some point. And let that change be for the positive. One thing I say is take your cue from a butterfly. After the process, it has never gone back to being the caterpillar.
I love that, especially because I have a dear friend, also an advocate who raises butterflies. And we talk a lot about caterpillar to butterfly. And I'll give her a shout out because I know she's here today. It's Dawn Gibson, who is the founder of Spooniechat on Twitter. Well, we have made it through the panel discussion amongst ourselves, and now we're going to move over to the Q&A. We've got a lot of questions from people in the audience. Thank you all so much for being here with us and continuing to be with us and, contributing your questions. So let's see, I'm going to start with the first one from, I hope I pronounced people's names right, Sherry Toh, who said earlier on, so it was in response to, I don't remember whose comment, but they said, absolutely, how do we get to a life plan? For instance, long-term plans when we are dealing with short-term health crises. Does anybody want to answer that question or provide any input? Just unmute yourself, whoever wants to go.
I think you
Claire?
start with,
Oh, go ahead, Paris.
Okay. I think you start with acknowledgement. That's one of the hardest things. Acknowledge that there is an issue. It needs to be dealt with. And then you start to surround yourself with those that care. Surround yourself with people that can help you. Even what Claire said, and Michelle, doing those research, doing the information, looking to see about the other professionals that are out there, and linking up with someone who is dealing with the same maybe disease that you're dealing with, but also has the same mindset as you as well, so that they can help guide you through that process during that time, give you different tips, maybe some things that you're just not thinking about, because, so new, and if you're thinking short term, they can give you some certain guidance and lead you in the right direction.
Thank you, Paris. Did anybody else want to contribute anything to this question about, how do you create a long-term plan if you're dealing with a short-term health crisis? If not, we can move to, Claire.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say it can be so overwhelming when you're living in such deep uncertainty and you don't know in some cases, you don't know what tomorrow is going to look like, let alone 3 or 4 or 5 years from now. And that used to really up. I have really found a lot of peace in living in the moment, in meditation, and trying to have the most flexibility that I can in my schedule. But to what Paris said too, you know, having a really strong support system that's going to love you through those transitions, especially if you think it's going to go one way and it ends up going the other, you know, to have people that are going to be there in your corner no matter what.
Thank you, Claire. There's another Porphyria question here, so I'm just going to share it. They tested in high school as having acute intermittent porphyria. Linda says, I have about 2 or 3 attacks per year, and I'm unable to get treatment as my doctor won't treat until my urine test shows elevation of toxins. How can I get treatment for chronic symptoms and acute symptoms until they, I think she means before they show up, unless they show up in tests? I need treatment but I am discounted because porphyria is not expected to affect after menopause. And it sounds like it hasn't shown up except as slightly elevated. Claire, do you have any input for this?
You know, diagnosing porphyria is one of the most challenging things that I've heard discussed in the community. I'm not a doctor, obviously. I was lucky enough to get a diagnosis, but I know that is such a huge challenge for some people. And Linda, hi. I know we've talked before, and I'm sorry that you're still struggling with this. I would suggest talking to the American Porphyria Foundation or the United Porphyrias Association as well, as resources to help you. And maybe it's time to get a second or third opinion, because if you're having untreated attacks, that can be just very hard on your body. The thing about menopause is pretty specific, so I'll just really quick say that anecdotally, I've known people who have felt better after menopause, and then I've also heard people who don't. So again, I think that rare diseases manifest so differently for everyone. It goes back to not being able to plan long-term, right? If I think that I'm going to be in the clear, you know, when I'm in my 50s and that I'm not, it's not helpful for me to plan that. I guess it's most helpful for me to just live in the moment.
Thank you, Claire. All right, now we have a question from Ali Blay, specifically for Brandy and Paris. Now, Brandy hasn't been speaking as a panelist. She's been working like crazy to do this incredible ASL interpretation nonstop. So Brandy, I'll leave it up to you if you'd like to answer or not. The question is, Brandy and Paris, could you talk about what led to your ultimate treatment of Cushing's disease? Was it surgery or medical therapy? What does maintenance look like now? Paris, if you want to go ahead.
I was fortunate enough to have a really good neurosurgeon, Dr. Crises, Dr. Samuel Crises. I just want to give him a shout out, but also the endocrinologist team that worked with him. We were able to identify that, you know, once the tumor was removed, I was doing good. Like Claire, I went back to work and I was going to fight through, and I was not listening to a lot of things. But then I started to also notice that the symptoms were coming back again, but the tumor wasn't the problem, because the tumor wasn't growing anymore. It had actually stopped. And I ended up getting clearance from my neurosurgeon. One of the things that I realized was the steroids that I started to take even after for my hormonal balance was creating more issues than it was doing anything else. So not my recommendation, but my wife, who's a medical professional, she told me to just stop taking it all together. And then I went to the natural, and this is where the maintenance for me came in. And I had to wait until the steroids got out of my body, which took a good amount of time. But also the maintenance mode was more of doing a lot of detoxing, doing a lot of flushes with my body, doing a lot of natural eating. I turned to a plant-based diet for a long time, and now I've mixed plant-based with seafood. So just taking that whole approach and the timing and getting different, to get a different regimen, something that was going to fit me. And I always tell someone else, if you're going through it, it might be some trial and error. You may be going through different things, different combinations, but understand the makeup of your body. And if you start to see something is working for you, then you stick with it. But just continue to build on that. I don't want to take up any time because I do want Brandy to have an opportunity to answer it as well.
Sorry, do you mind repeating the question?
Yeah, let me go ahead, Brandy. Give me 1 second to pull it up. Sorry, you guys. We have quite a lot of questions and comments, and thank you all for them. Where did it go? It was a really short one. Maybe it's in the answer. Oh, hold on.
Oh.
I got it. Brandy and Paris, could you talk about what led to your ultimate treatment of Cushing's disease? Was it surgery or medical therapy? What does maintenance look like now?
Okay. Hi, thank you for your question. For me, I ended up having, it's a really long word, a transfernoidal approach. It's when the doctors or surgeons go through the nasal cavities, chop up the tumor, and then pull it all out. So that was my approach. Gross, I know. Now, maintenance really looks like a lot of mental health, just taking care of my mental health, watching, getting frequent MRIs, a lot of blood work too, to monitor my blood levels. So that's really everything for me.
Thank you, Brandy. Thank you. We're going to look for one last question. Let me go through and see where I had the last question. Sorry if this is a little bit disorganized. All right, this is from Paul Miller. Paul Miller says, I have ALS and I'm struggling mentally, especially during the winter months. With ALS, you normally have 2 to 5 years to live after diagnosis, and it takes 1 to 2 years to get a diagnosis. ALS is a death disease. It has no cure. I'm living with ALS for over 9 years now and still have friends who say how good I look. When are you getting better? People are just not aware of how bad ALS is. Mentally, I feel like I'm getting survivor's guilt because so many ALS patients have come and gone and I'm still living. Friends younger than me are passing away and I feel, why not me? Do you believe in die with dignity for people with no cure diseases? Now I realize panelists and all attendees, that's a very personal question, the last question that Paul asked. So I will leave it to your discretion to answer in however way you would like. If anybody has anything they'd like to say. Paul, I think we're all really taking in your words and sitting here with you.
The part that is resonating with me too is when your friends ask, when you're going to get better, or when the people in your life are judging, I don't know, how sick you are, or if the fact that you even have a disease based purely on your looks or how you carry yourself in the world or the things that you're involved in. And that's really challenging because what are you supposed to do? Not get out of bed? You know, if you have the energy, you're trying to live your life, you're trying to make the most of the time that you have. It's a really challenging situation. Thank you for sharing with us, Paul, and thank you for logging in today.
Thank you, Claire. Does anybody else have any words to share?
I kind of like the first part of your question, Paul, where, like Claire said, people are asking you, you know, when are you getting better? You don't look sick, things like that. For me, because I also work on the Myasthenia Gravis forums, so I read posts and such, and I read stories of people who currently are going through a lot. The treatments aren't working, or the life isn't going the way they want it to. And kind of speaking on your survivor's guilt, I read those and I feel incredibly guilty. I go, how did I end up in remission and someone else didn't? So I think for me, I mean, it really goes back to mental health, and finding a way to work your own thoughts out of your head, speaking to someone. So I think, like we've talked about a lot, like a support system and things like that, because I can get really stuck in my guilt and feeling really bad. But I think kind of talking about it and speaking it out loud is where I kind of understand more of what I'm thinking and trying to work it out. So I hope that helps a little bit with that.
Thank you, Michelle.
If I may, I do have a comment on that.
Yes, absolutely, Brandy.
Sorry, with Cushing's disease, I know that many people wait maybe like a decade to get their diagnosis or longer. And I know with many other, you know, rare diseases, it can take a long time. And for me, when I'm thinking about guilt, I believe I lived with this disease for 4 years. And that's really short for someone with Cushing's disease. And I feel like by advocating for other people who maybe don't have it as easy as I do through Instagram, and I get many direct messages, and I'm just always willing to help and support in any way I can. And I feel like that's me kind of giving back to the community. Just wanted to put that out there.
Brandy, thank you so much. I think that's true for all of us. And, you know, in the cancer community as well, very much so. We have this thing that we call, it's a hashtag, fearless friends, where people, for instance, in breast cancer who have early stage disease, that was my case, you know, where we have all of these people who have late stage disease, or what's called, you know, for instance, in breast cancer, it's called metastatic breast cancer. And, you know, how can we be there for each other? And how can we be in community together? And how can we be fearless friends and sit with each other and hold space? And, you know, and like I said, just be there together. Like I feel we have been all together here today. Time is running out, so I would like to wrap it up and just, I have some closing remarks. One thing I love about this work, and it happens so often when you get a group of passionate, generous advocates together, is that we all learn from each other. And it doesn't matter what our diagnosis is. It doesn't matter if you're newly diagnosed or if you're a veteran, and we all can help and mentor each other. Again, it doesn't matter what our diagnosis is. Of course, sometimes it does, but in this case today, you know, it's so validating to know we aren't alone, especially when very few people in the world have your diagnosis or your experience. So before we go, I want to honor and thank, first of all of you wonderful panelists and this incredible team of people without whom this event would not have been able to see the light of day. I want to thank my amazing team of collaborators who worked so hard to make our Rare Disease Day event possible. And I'm going to say everyone's names: First of all, you did not see her on screen, but Jen Powell, Director of Advocacy and Outreach, is my dream work partner. Amazing, amazing person. Jen, you worked so hard. You learned all sorts of new things. Thank you so much, and for all the wisdom and heart that you bring into everything that you do. Brandy Moody, you have done your ASL interpreting with such ease and delight. Thank you so much, and such heart as well. Thank you for, you've been on, I think we've been like 90 minutes nonstop. Thank you. Bree Albers, thank you so much. Thank you for being willing to join us today and to read your friend Sherry's words for us. And Alexandra McGregor, also off screen, working tirelessly to help us make this as seamless as can be and a wonderful experience. Thank you, Ali. People who work behind the scenes at Bionews who were also super, super duper involved and who I cannot thank enough. Ali Eltonen, we have two Alis, marketing manager, responsible for the beautiful graphics and so much more. Ryan Gawley, business analyst lead. If you receive the fantastic emails from the various platforms like SMA News Today or Cushing's Disease News, thank Ryan for that. And then last but not least, Britt Foster, who's our HR manager and helped also tirelessly to help me bring everyone together to be with us all today. And so now to all of you who have joined us, I just want to again, one more time, thank you so much for spending your time with us. Please be on the lookout for an email. It'll have some follow-up questions in it, and it will arrive in the next day or so. We would love to hear from you. Thank you all so much again, and have a wonderful rest of your rare disease day wherever you may be.